Is there something that you're wanting your company that you're thinking, I want to expand my company to offer this service or to offer this geography, but can you buy it instead? Welcome to Profits and Pints, where strategy meets great conversation and real-world action. I'm Samantha Doyle. Grab a drink, settle in, and let's dive into this month's big idea.
This Profits and Pints is actually our very first panel discussion. Normally we have Samantha who leads this discussion, but we have a whole panelist here today to talk about one of our very favorite topics, growth through acquisition. And these panelists are experts in their field, and they're going to be leading this discussion of what to go through in every stage of growth through acquisition. And before we get started, I wanted to take a second to introduce you guys to someone who many of you probably already know, Samantha Doyle. She is the owner of Strategic Business Coaching. She has over a decade of experience buying, growing, and selling multiple businesses. She honestly is passionate about helping other business owners navigate critical transitions in their business, whether that's preparing to acquire, stepping out of the daily operations, or planning for exit. So I just wanted to say thank you guys for coming here. So I'd love to hand this on over to Samantha.
Thank you, Sky.
Yeah.
So have you guys ever heard the phrase, be careful what you wish for? So Sky is wanting to be a coach. And so when she told me this, I said, oh, great. So then you're going to talk at Profits and Pints. And so I threw her up there, and I think I told her this on Friday. So she decided, or I decided that she was going to introduce me and talk for a few sections today. So that was her first introduction. So I just want a quick shout out to Sky. Sky is my program coordinator. She's my assistant. She's my dad's assistant as well, and I could not do anything that I do without her. So can we give Sky a round of applause, please? Thank you. If you don't have a Sky in your life, please get one. Okay, so I'm just going to do a quick introduction before we bring the panelists up here. As Sky mentioned, my name's Samantha Doyle, owner of Strategic Business Coaching. I see a lot of friendly faces, and I see a lot of new faces, and I'm really, really excited about that. I'm so happy to be hosting Profits and Pints. This is, I believe, our 6th Profits and Pints that we've done. So it's been a huge turnout here, and I'm really excited about to get this started. So today is about growth through acquisition. And so this could be for anyone who already owns a business. It could also be for someone who maybe doesn't yet own a business. So I'm going to talk a little bit about both, just so I kind of get a gauge here. Who here is already a business owner? Can you raise your hand? Okay, great. And then who here is maybe thinking about owning a business but does not yet own a business? Anyone? No? Okay, great. Then I'll only talk about one. That's great. That makes it a lot easier. Okay, so just a quick thing is I want to talk about the strategy behind this before we bring up the panelists, because the panelists, we're going to talk a little bit about the details of it, but the first thing you have to do if you're going to grow through acquisition is the strategy behind it. And so why should you grow through acquisition? You already own a business. Why should you do this? Why buy versus build? So the first thing is that when you buy a business, you're buying things such as cash flow, customers, and a team on day one, okay? For most of you, you've built this from scratch. How hard is it to build cash flow, teams, and those customers, right? It can take a lot of time, but if you buy another business, you get it like that, right? If you do it right. Also, you can jump capabilities. You can also jump geography when you buy another business. And a lot of times you can also capture these synergies that the other companies have. And that can give you things like pricing power. You can also cross-sell. So, and we'll go into a little bit about what the different types of acquiring can look like. But this can give you a huge leg up in the industry when you're able to acquire another business that maybe does a different like service or the same service. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. The next thing I want to talk about is why now? Why should you do it right now? Right now, there is a humongous opportunity. Some are calling it the silver tsunami, okay? The boomer wave is another way of looking at it. So over half of U.S. privately held businesses right now are owned by baby boomers. I'm going to say that again because this is huge. Over half of the U.S. companies are owned by baby boomers. That's insane, guys. And so, or over by 55 plus, sorry, not all boomers. And so because of this, over the next 10 to 15 years, there's going to be a huge wave, right? The silver tsunami is what they're calling it. And there's going to be a huge opportunity where these business owners, a lot of them are not prepared to exit. They actually don't know what they're going to do. In fact, if you ask them, I don't know the exact stat, but I think it's something like 60 to 70% of them are going to be like, well, I'm just going to work till I die. That's their plan. That's their exit strategy. It's a great strategy, right? And so as a business owner, you have a huge opportunity here to take advantage of this. Now, I don't mean take advantage of them. It's actually take advantage of this, and it actually helps them. So it's a win-win situation if done right. And like I said, many of these exits are underprepared, and they are open to a very reasonable, confidential approach. Okay, so if you're sitting here thinking, well, I don't have the money for this, I don't know how to approach this, just think again, because it is actually a lot more reasonable and a lot more approachable and a lot more doable than you may think that it is, especially with the amount of these business owners that are going to be transitioning over the next few years. So types of acquisition, I'm just going to go through this really quickly. This is just kind of a rough overview of some different types of acquisition. Geographic expansion, all right? So one example, you're a business in Eugene and you want to expand in Albany, okay? Let's say you're a landscape company and you want to expand into Albany, buy a landscape company in Albany, right? That's one way of expanding. You could start up a business in Albany, but you don't have trust, you don't have staff, you don't have any infrastructure in Albany whatsoever. But if you buy a company in Albany, you now have that geography. It's a much faster and much simpler way to expand into another geography. Service expansion. So I actually did this with a welding repair company. So I owned a welding repair company and we did gas apparatus repair, and we bought an electric repair company. Sorry, I can't even say it. And so it was the same client, different service, right? And so if you do if you can buy a similar service to the same clientele, that's a service expansion. All right. Next one is a competitor. This one's pretty simple. So you can buy a competitor out, right? You're buying the competitor out, you buy their customer list, you're now expanding your reach that way. The next two is a vendor and a customer. So this is downstream and upstream. So the examples I have here is like a coffee shop that buys a bakery. They now have control over their margins. They're now controlling the baked goods that they have available in their coffee shop. So that's a vendor relationship. And then a customer is kind of the opposite. So the example I have here is, let's say it's a commercial kitchen that wants to start doing catering. They could buy a catering company, for example, right? So those are all kind of examples. The last two, marketing assets. So think of a gym that buys a fitness blog, right? You want to expand your reach. You could actually buy something like a fitness blog in order to expand your reach. And then the last one is a capability or certification. I actually use what we'll see here, one of the panelists, who is my father, owned a calibration company, and a lot of the acquisitions that he did, they got special certifications or accreditations through those acquisitions. And so if you're looking for some kind of license or tool or expertise within an industry, you can acquire a business that actually gives you that credibility when you buy a company. And a lot of times you can get more than one of these at the same time. Right? It's not one or the other. You can get more than one. All right? So I want you to be thinking about what makes sense for your industry, what makes sense for your company. Is there something that you're wanting your company that you're thinking, I want to expand my company to offer this service or to offer this geography, but can you buy it instead? Okay, and so the first thing you're going to do is you're going to create your buy box, right? So if you think about your company and where you would buy or what you would buy, you want to create your buy box. Filter, and really what this is it's a filter that kind of keeps you sane. It kind of keeps you like in your strategy, because you don't want to be going in there like, oh, I'm going to buy this and I'm going to buy this and I'm going to buy this, because it gets to be a little bit too much. So you want to look at like what's the size that you're looking for, what's the niche, the geography, is there certain margins that you're looking for in this company? Is there a certain culture or brand that you're looking for? Are there some must-haves or some no-goes in this company that are like definitely absolutely not? What this does is this helps the broker, which we're going to talk to today, when you come to them, to really narrow down what it is that you're looking for. So I put an example here, EBITDA, which is earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization. If you don't know what that is, we'll talk later. Between 500 and 1.5 million, a commercial service with recurring contracts within Lane County or adjacent, with EBITDA of 18%. We want to keep the lead operators, so a company where they have a good lead operator with no single customer over more than 25%, We prefer an asset deal, and the seller transitions within 90 days. So we wouldn't want someone where the seller wants to stay for longer than 90 days. So that's something to keep in mind. So this is kind of an example of the buy box of kind of what you were looking for that you can then present to the broker that they can then help look for the ideal purchase for you. Any questions on that? It's a lot of information. The goal here is that you want to have a strategy. If you're going to acquire another business, don't just go willy-nilly looking for a business to buy. Have a strategy behind it on why you're buying that business and how it's going to improve your current business. Okay? So now, now that I talked about that, we're going to talk to some expert panelists, which I'm super excited to bring up here. We talked about strategy. Now we're going to bring up, first, I want to introduce the amazing and the lovely Lonnie Woodruff. Everyone give Lonnie a round of applause here. Lonnie is a broker with Transworld and a longtime friend, and I'm going to go ahead and give you a hug here because Lonnie is amazing. And go ahead and sit down. Next, we're going to bring up Jeff. Jeff, come on up, please. And Jeff is our lender from Heritage Bank. And I've done quite a bit of work with Heritage Bank. This is my first time meeting Jeff. We had a few different interactions, and I'm super excited to have you. Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate it. Eric Bell is our CPA. Come on up, Eric. Eric is with Eisler CPA. Also, we have just met, and he was a referral from Mike, actually, which I'm going to bring up in a second. And we had a great conversation at the beginning of here, so I'm really excited to have him up here. Mike is the next one. Mike Falconer, come on up, please. Mike is a M&A attorney here in Eugene. Very well known in the Eugene industry, and so he's going to be a great resource for us to have here. Yeah, I love it. I love it. And last, very, very much not least, is Marshall Doyle. Come on up. Some of you know him as Papa Doyle. This is my dad, guys. And Marshall, my father, so he is an extraordinary business owner, and he did not pay me to say this, but he has he's owned multiple businesses. He's done over 35 acquisitions. I think that we lost count at some point. He's also the board member for a private equity firm, and so he's got some insight into kind of the growth through acquisition. He's going to be our case study for today. Okay, so big welcome for all the panelists as we get started. Okay. So go ahead, we're gonna start with you, Lonnie. Basically the way that we're gonna do this, guys, is I'm gonna ask some questions, and we're gonna go kind of down the line, and we're gonna take this as kind of a do's and don'ts, right? We're gonna go down the line through this in order kind of thing, though it's not always in this exact order by any means. There's a lot of passing the ball back and forth. And then what we're gonna do is I want you guys to write down questions. We're gonna have some time for questions at the end, but I'm gonna try and go through each of the panelists as we go through this and then save the questions for the end if that's okay for you guys. But we will have plenty of time for questions at the end. Okay, does that sound good? Great. Okay. So Lonnie, hi. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Good. Thank you. Thank you for having the mic. I appreciate that. So we talked about strategy a little bit and kind of that first step of making sure that someone knows what they're talking about when they come to you. First of all, how often does that happen?
Most of the time, but not by much.
Okay, cool. I was just wondering. I was curious about that. Okay, so the first question I have for you, as a broker, before the LOI stage, and for those of you that don't know, an LOI is a letter of intent. So this is kind of the first stage, and maybe you can talk a little bit about that. What are the top 3 early deal killers that you see that come up during that process?
Well, through the merger lens, it's really not having clear strategies of what you're trying to do. Like if you're a business trying to buy a business, like you nailed it. Are we trying to expand footprint? Do we want to vertically integrate? Or are you just kind of seeing what's out there and kicking tires? If you're just kind of seeing what's out there and kicking tires, you're going to lose out to people that have a just better strategy. You're going to lose credibility with the sellers and the buyer and the brokers like almost immediately. Mm-hmm. So like it's hopefully you meet a broker, then they kind of like help you firm that up a little bit and send you back to do some more strategy planning and stuff like that. So then you come back to the market with some definitions of what you want to do.
Yeah. What are some things that you typically say to someone that comes to you that is obviously kind of just kicking tires? What are some things that you typically say to them?
If I feel like they're kind of wavering in the wind, I really just kind of like, hey, so what are you guys trying to accomplish here? Like, let's talk through some strategies. Like, do you just want a bigger footprint? You want to move across state lines? You want to offer better services? I mean, usually if they're hunting for something, I just try to help them solve their goals. So, like, what are those goals?
Right. Great. I love that. And then what is one do that instantly makes a buyer credible with the brokers and the sellers?
Lots of conversations. So lots of conversations. I tend to have more conversations before the LOI stage than maybe most people, because I think if you eliminate deal killers up front, it saves everybody time and frustration, and it's fair to all parties. So I mean, not everybody's realistic. So like there's a saying in our office, get ugly early, is like if you have a skeleton in a closet or something like that, or the buyer or the seller have an unrealistic expectation, like let's talk about it ahead of time. I mean, if a business is like spitting off cash and there's no headaches, odds are it's not for sale. Let's talk about the skeletons and see if we have a plan for them, or see if we're okay with them, or we just need to move on to the next project.
Great, I love that. And then what's a don't that destroys credibility fast, and how do you avoid it?
Having lack of direction is the one thing that just like if you feel like you're spinning your wheels, you don't have strategy, nobody's going to work with you. Like if you don't have a clear direction, nobody's going to work with you at all. Banks aren't going to work with you. Attorneys, there's nothing to write up. There's nothing to have a conversation about.
I love that. And then maybe, and I should have started with this, tell us a little bit about kind of what your part of the process is. So I put you first for a reason. Why did I put you first, Lonnie?
Sometimes I'm the tip of the spear for sourcing for opportunities, but really instead of this being like linear, I view this as like a team.
Yep.
Like each side would have a team. Like you'd have a financial advisor, banker, attorney, and all that stuff. We all work together on each side of a deal to like make it come to fruition. So it's, each side has half a village. I always say each side has half a village. So we all work together to make a deal go to the finish line. Because really, finding a deal and getting an LOI is, I don't know, what, Marshall, half of it? Half of the work? 10%? Yeah. Yeah, and I try to have as much conversations and work things out as, kind of creatively as possible with between both parties. So, I mean, like I can talk to both parties. So that's usually I try to work my magic and solving problems and stuff. And that's really what I do, solve problems.
You do, that's for sure. And just as a little bit of background too, when we met Lonnie, and I say we, was actually when we bought an IT company in 2020. Yeah, 2020.
Wow.
And he represented the seller, and we were the buyer. So, and we're still friends, so this is good, right? So, but that just goes to show both Lonnie and just kind of the importance of having a broker on your side to kind of represent you through the process and kind of help you see the blind spots and the things that you need to prepare for, and helping not just find the deal, but get through it as well. So I want to thank you for that process, even though you weren't on our side. It was great because you did help us push it through to the end, honestly.
It was an honor and a pleasure.
It was great. It was great. Anything else you want to add before we moved on?
Talk about growth through acquisition. There's an unknown factor that I've noticed that nobody talks about. Everybody looks at it through like the lens of just acquiring cash flow. But let's look at it. If you grow organically, you're only as good as the talent you have in your team. You have those like little pots of gold. When you buy companies, you might end up with a purchasing manager or an office manager or something like that that's just an absolute rock star. Your overall end result is so much better than you growing organically. Like it's really the way to do it.
I completely agree. I agree. Thank you so much, Lonnie. I appreciate it. Thank you. Everybody, thank you to Lonnie. Okay. Are you up? Are you ready? Are you ready? Okay,
Ready.
Great. Okay, well, why don't we start by you tell us a little bit about kind of what your role in this whole process is, and just a little bit about you and Heritage.
Sure. Jeff Kister, Heritage Bank, and my role is starting to gather all the information of the request, finding out if it's going to pencil. And by that, we start out by looking at a 1-to-1 ratio and kind of work our way there. For every dollar of income, is there, or for every dollar of expense, is there $1 of net income? And through that, we are looking at everything from the pro forma or projections of the two combined businesses, historic performance, any personal liabilities that may contribute to the global picture of that request. And so my role is to kind of put all those pieces together at once and see if it's going to make sense just from day one. And then there's lots of steps to the process after that.
Yes, there is. Yeah, you're definitely part of the whole process. And when I say it's not linear, but I tried to put it somewhat linear, mainly because this is a line here, and I had to put them in a line. And so this is good. So my first question for you is, in underwriting, what are the deal killers that most often derail the acquisitions kind of right off the bat?
The biggest factors, well, the most common turndown factor that I see is a lack of collateral. So a collateral shortfall in an acquisition, which means there's too much blue sky or enterprise value assessed to a business. And a lot of that can be sentimental value. There can be other factors that maybe overstating branding, something along those lines that a seller really feels adds to the value of their business. We're looking at it from a paper perspective of if that cash flow and that EBITDA reference, there's an EBITDA multiplier, other factors that go into how is that a tangible number that we're looking at on the blue sky piece of the business versus the asset component. And you mentioned all these are asset purchases, but there's always a piece of blue sky that gets added in that somewhere along the lines. From the bank perspective, we're going to take a depreciated value. We're going to look at the remaining economic life. There's all kinds of factors that go into what is this asset really worth compared to maybe what it's sitting at on the balance sheet. If you go and replace that table, for instance, it might be sitting on the balance sheet at a certain number, but we're going to say, here's the market value minus a discount value, because once it sells, that's really what it's worth, right? Like pretty simply, something is only worth what somebody is willing to pay for it.
I just had a quick question. Is there another name for blue sky?
Goodwill.
Goodwill, yeah.
Goodwill.
Yeah.
Is that what it is? Goodwill.
Yeah.
Great, perfect, thank you. So what's one do to be lender ready before the LOI?
When somebody comes in prepared and they understand how their business makes money, it makes for a really productive, efficient interaction. So they walk in and they say, I do this, X, and by hiring or acquiring this business, I'll be able to double my capacity, reduce redundancies. Maybe I have a great office manager that is going to plug in, take out that $100,000 salary at this other company. This is on a mergers and acquisition basis. And so you eliminated redundancy by utilizing efficiencies you have in your company already and optimizing with the capacity, which it could be equipment through automation.
Automation, there you go.
I'll get it one more time. Automation. It could be great staff, as Lonnie had referenced, where you have that diamond in the rough, somebody in the staff that is just a rock star, and they generate twice as much revenue as anybody else on your existing team or that acquisition team.
Great, I love that. That's fantastic. And then what's one don't that often stalls the deals late in the process?
Start to come up ratios, we're talking 1-to-1 or EBITDA. It sounds good, you may feel like you have a good grasp of it, and then you go back and you start to pencil it out. And I know it gets confusing. So what am I adding back? What am I taking away? What do I compare this to? Is this ratio right? I don't want to feel dumb. I'm not going to ask any more questions, right? And people just kind of stall out on that front due to just getting intimidated by all those various factors. Actually, when a really good broker is involved that's willing to talk to you and you're capable, it's a viable deal, things are making sense, you're within 10 degrees of success or failure or completion or incompletion of the deal, those brokers will push it over the edge because they have that relationship with the seller piece that's providing the input data right? If you only have a limited piece of the picture and you walk in and you start talking to a banker, it becomes really hard for the banker to fill in the gaps. And any assumptions from a finance standpoint are likely going to go against you. So it'll be a conservative assessment on the banker's behalf, just by nature, and likely by most CPAs, right? We're going to be conservative in our assessment for your benefit. We're not going to say, oh yeah, you're going to do 2 times industry average, so that'll be our assumption. Our assumption's going to be 75% of industry average, right? So know and get the input data from the seller side, from the broker to the banker, and then sit down with it and we can all talk about real numbers.
I love that. Is there anything else that you kind of want to add that are recommendations for people who might be considering growth through acquisition?
Yeah. So everybody looks at a banker and it's like, oh, another banker, right? Another CPA, another business broker. We are all different. We're all people as well. But we go about our business differently. So finding somebody that talks in a language that makes sense to you, it might be your attorneys, it might be somebody that you connect with, is so important. So this person could be the most well-regarded individual in your community, and you go, oh, I have to do business with this person. You have an interaction with them, and it's just a push-pull the whole time. You never really get synced up, and it never feels great. You need to have that relationship, even, I'll use the banker example, where you can walk in and say, all right, here's what I'm thinking. Do you mind running the numbers for me? And your banker goes, yeah, it doesn't look good. And they feel comfortable telling you it doesn't look good. You feel comfortable asking them why, right? It could be a product set. So banks have different focuses. So a business bank may be focused on product sets that meet that 1.5 million and below. You might have a commercial bank that's focused on larger numbers, but it doesn't mean that they're not also hitting marks in other areas, right? So get to know their product set, somebody that you can talk to, assemble a group of professionals around you that you feel comfortable talking to. And I'm sure each one of you have somebody in your peer group where you go, I'm jealous of that relationship with their professional partner. And just think of that. Find those people in your life.
Great advice. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Okay, so we got the broker. We found the deal, right? Now we've ran the numbers with the finance team. So now we need to talk about the tax. This is very important, okay? So tax is a big deal. So we're gonna talk to Eric here. So Eric, why don't you introduce yourself and kind of what your role in this is?
So my name is Eric Bell. I'm with Eisler CPA here in town. But yeah, my role in the process is again to look at the tax side of things. I think taxes are one of the biggest expenses a business owner has and has to deal with, as well as tax filings. And so that's where I come in and help advise and really do the due diligence on that side of things.
Great, I love it. Thank you. So from the CPA lens, what are the deal killers, right? So what are those things that show up most kind of at the beginning stages that are those deal killers?
So first thing I would say is basically how good is their accounting? Like a lot of the time I'll have clients come to me and say, hey, I'm looking at this business, but we don't really do a due diligence on who's doing the accounting for the business. And that's where the numbers start. Like, you need you need good numbers. And depending on the size of the business, you have smaller businesses who may be using a spouse or a friend as the accountant, or doing the books, I should say. And then you may have a smaller CPA running the tax returns, to larger businesses which have maybe more sophisticated, bookkeepers or more experienced. So that, I think you need to really do some due diligence there and saying, hey, are these books really in order? Because if you can't have faith in the books and the numbers, where are you getting your selling price? Where are you going to get your loan from? Just doesn't make sense. So I think that's number one deal killer. Number two is I would think cash flow. If you mapped out the cash flows, this would be probably part of the other additional due diligence, but are you mapping out cash flows? Are you seeing if there's seasonality to the business? Are you going to have to be putting in money at certain times of the year because it just won't cash flow? That's another side of things. And I think the last big one is really looking at your tax exposure. Bringing on a new business may mean new tax filings, new tax exposure to other states. other jurisdictions, maybe areas you don't want to be involved in. I mean, look at, for example, if I'm located outside of Lane County, buy a business outside of Lane County, there are certain taxes I don't have to be paying, or at least let's say Eugene. But if you're in Eugene, there are certain taxes you have to pay, and so maybe that's something you just don't want to deal with. Maybe it's worth your time, and that's where I would come in and talk about those kind of things and look at them.
Great, love it. So what is one do that buyers should cover with their CPA? Maybe questions they should ask before the LOI.
I think the big thing is talking with your CPA about what the tax consequences are for the purchase. Tax, right now we've mentioned about asset purchases, and there's certain aspects to an assets purchase that will help reduce your income, take deductions, and how you're going to allocate the purchase price based on your, the assets. On another side of it, which we're not talking about, but it could be a stock sale. You buy the stock of the company, and you may say there are inherent risks with that as well. However, there are also certain situations where that may be necessary. For example, if you're buying a company that has specialized contracts that the contracts can't be changed. You have to buy the company, buy the stocks. Well, there's different tax consequences to that. And overall, if you're looking at a buyer and a seller, if something's advantageous to the seller, it's probably not going to be advantageous to the buyer, and what's advantageous to you is not going to be advantageous to the seller. So there's a yin and yang there, a push and a pull. And the really question is getting in with your CPA and saying, hey, how does this look? What's going to be most tax advantageous for me? Because you want to get that stuff in the LOI. I mean, LOI is not binding, but you want to get it up front. So,
yeah, I love that. And yes, I agree with I've done both asset and stock purchases, and sometimes you got to do stock because of those contracts. It's very important. So I agree with that completely.
Using Mike's words, binding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, I thought that was in the contract I sent you. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, so then what's one don't that leads to a painful tax or cash surprises?
I think one of the biggest things is not including your CPA early enough. There are situations where client brings me in, they've already done talking, they're mostly through their due diligence, and I'm like, hey, you should change it this way, and they're like too far along in the process to try and change the contract, or you should adjust the purchase price because of this. Ooh, we're pretty firm in that purchase price. The seller's not going to want to change. I have a situation. It's not a sale of a business, but an individual I had, he sold some land. He came into our office and said, hey, I want to do a 1031 and defer the gain. We asked him some questions. We quickly determined that he did not qualify to defer some $750,000 a gain. And it was a tough pill to swallow. And like, hey, if you would have just got us involved earlier, we could have helped you out. So that I think that's a big one.
Great.
Getting you involved.
I love that. Anything else that you want to add or suggestions that you want to make for anybody considering growth or acquisition?
I think one of the big suggestions is we talk about looking at the company you're buying, but it's also important to do a reflection of who you are and what you have. Because, and I say this because I heard this quote one time, it says, what got you where you're at is not going to get you where you're going. So your accounting processes, maybe even your current CPA, has got you to where you're at, but if you buy another business, is it going to double, triple you? Are your accounting process still going to work? Or do you need to upgrade your accounting team? Do you need to upgrade your CPA? So I would say that's a big, it's a lot of self-reflection. Say, where are we at? Can we handle the new work, the new responsibilities, the new tax filings? So
yeah, and I think that's probably across the board, tax or both on the accounting and operations and all across the board.
Yeah.
So great insight. Thank you so much. Okay, so now, Mike, we need your expertise here. So tell us a little bit about you and what is your role in this?
Okay, I'm Mike Faulkner. I'm a business attorney. Mm-hmm. I counsel a lot of clients in both sales and purchases of businesses. So you're going to come to me. Hopefully you'll have already done 1, 2, 3, and if you haven't, I'll probably say, nope, go back to number 3. Because it really does take a team, and if you're looking to acquire a business, you want to have everybody on your side, and I work a lot with the CPAs on the deals, and one of the first questions I'm going to ask is, who's your CPA? And have you talked to them about the best way to potentially structure this? Have you talked to him about getting on board to help with the financial and tax due diligence, and then hopefully when I've ascertained that they've kind of got these ducks in a row and it's my turn to step in, we'll talk about how to start presenting an LOI to the seller, and so that's kind of where I start.
Yeah.
And then I'll walk through the whole process with you through the LOI stage, and then later through the purchase agreement stage, and in some capacity with the due diligence, and then all the way through to closing, and even after closing.
Yeah.
To make sure everything's going the way it's supposed to.
Good. I love that. So the first question that I have for you is, legally, what are the top pitfalls that most often blow up the deals late?
So I think the biggest thing is, I think a key word was brought up a minute ago about an LOI being non-binding. A good LOI is non-binding, but it needs to be thorough enough to set a solid set of mutual expectations. Because if it doesn't, you may find yourself later realizing, the buyer and the seller didn't really have a meeting of the minds on what the deal terms are, what their objectives are, what my objectives are, and things have been left out. And, a lot of the time, I hate to see it, but I wouldn't say a lot of the time, but I do feel some of the time, that can blow up a deal late. And it shouldn't, because, again, setting mutual expectations should prevent that. It doesn't prevent it all the time, because there are always surprises along the way. So I'd say the second thing would be just making sure the due diligence is thorough. A lot of the times you realize it just wasn't quite thorough enough. And I think that the due diligence is probably principally on you as the acquirer to do, but you really should be talking with your CPA and you should be talking with your lawyer to help figure out how to target that due diligence, figure out what's important, what you should be asking for and looking at, getting our help to review contracts, to help figure out what the issues are going to be before they become issues later. And, some of the time we end up uncovering those issues later on in the process when we get disclosure schedules, from the reps and warranties. We're 7 days away from closing, and what's this? This is a surprise. Well, it shouldn't have been a surprise, but sometimes things slip through the cracks. But the better your due diligence is, the more thorough you are, and the more you involve your professionals, the more likely you're going to be to avoid those things happening late and killing a deal.
Yeah, definitely. So what does one do for the LOI terms that can save pain later?
Yeah, I think talk with us, right? So sometimes I see a client will come in and they've already signed an LOI, and they're coming to me after it's signed, and then we didn't really get to address a lot of things. So let's not do that. Let's talk about what your objectives are here. What is the business that you're buying? What are the things that are sort of unique and specific to that business, that industry, that we really need to think ahead about? Let's cover those things. Let's make sure we have everything covered. One of the things that gets overlooked a lot, as an example, would be it's not real clear on what you're buying. I'm not just talking about structure, asset versus stock, although there's that as well, and those discussions need to be happening at that point. But what are you buying? I mean, are you buying a business that has no working capital, or are you expecting there to be $1 million of working capital? Is the cash included? Is it not included? Are you buying AR? Are you what are the expectations on those things? And they need to be figured out. So those are the type of thing that sometimes just gets pushed aside. But I really like to get into the working capital side of it and try to make sure we have a meeting of the minds on that, because that'll blow up a deal late.
Oh, yes, it will. Or after. Yeah, great. And what's one don't that you keep seeing in purchase agreements that backfires?
A don't in purchase agreements that backfires. Okay. I think purchase agreements need to be reasonable, right? So, it's when I'm representing sellers. So let's be straight about this first. The buyer's counsel should be drafting the purchase agreement. Don't ever agree to have the seller's counsel drafting the purchase agreement, because that's just going to get everything off on the wrong foot, and you're going to find yourself working with me to mark this thing all up to kingdom come to get it, and that's just not a good way to get things started. So you want your seller's counsel to draft the purchase agreement. your counsel to draft the purchase agreement. And we want to make sure that we are being thorough in covering the things we need to cover, but not over the top, because you can kind of lose a deal that way too. You don't want to just crush them with a 70-page purchase agreement for a deal that's, relatively speaking, not that big of a deal. So the more, the more we can kind of work through that together, the more we can really target and make sure that things are included that we need, and we don't have this overkill where there's 30 pages of stuff we don't really need. So I think that's one of the don'ts, is to make sure you don't overdo that, don't over-lawyer it.
That makes a lot of sense. Anything else that you want to add that is recommendation for anybody considering growth through acquisition?
Again, follow the steps. 1, 2, 3. By the time you get to me, I'll hope you have a CPA. If you don't, I know a good one I can send you to. So, again, work with us as a team. I know there's always a temptation to try to cut down on your legal fees and your professional fees, but you know what? You end up paying more later. I think if you do that, it's better to make sure you have got all your ducks in a row. You've crossed the T's, dotted the I's, and everything has been thoroughly reviewed and by your professionals. So that's the one thing I'd like to say.
That's great. Good advice, definitely. Okay, last but not least here, let's pass it on here. Marshall, hi, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you? This is fun, isn't it?
Yeah. So why don't you introduce yourself, a little bit about your background and what you're doing here?
My name is Marshall Doyle. I am Samantha's father. I bought my first business in 1999. It was a small business with a couple employees. I knew absolutely nothing about buying a business. So if you're thinking right now, this is something I could never do, stop thinking that, because I did it. And I did it through the right advice. We had the right deal. It was the right size. Yeah, it was not without risk, and so the risk, what these guys all just talked about is mitigating risk, right? You're really understanding that. And I'm a little embarrassed to say I didn't use this team as much as I should have in the early days. And although we did some pretty good deals, we did some deals that were really, had some disruption points that, we had to work through. And so what an amazing team, that you guys, put together. And now when we do them, we use the whole team, and a CPA and I are best friends. And, But anyway, so I bought several businesses. We bought in a roll-up strategy with a calibration business. Was it about 17?
There was 26 in the calibration.
Yeah, okay, I see 26. So we bought a lot of small companies to scale a calibration business, and we were about 3 buyouts in before I realized they have a name for that. It's called a roll-up. I had a business coach that told me, "Oh, you're doing a roll-up." I'm like, "What's a roll-up?" And what I realized is the value of growing through acquisition was working really well for my business. And it doesn't necessarily work for every business. I'd want you all to know that. So you've got to use this team to really help you with that, to really understand that. I think part of the reason it works so well with my business is because we had extreme repeat business with our clients, like 95% plus. And so it really worked. And after you did it once, it worked. Then the second time it worked, and the third time it worked. Pretty soon, it's going to work, right? And so that's where we went with that. And then we got a little crazy and bought some other stuff. And my wife's here; she'll attest to that. We went outside of the marketplace, bought a hotel, did some other things. But anyway, it was a good journey. I learned a lot along the way. Made a lot of mistakes along the way. And in the end, it turned out very well. We've sold a handful of businesses in the last few years. I sold my largest company, which we rolled up with was it 27 really?
26,
maybe 26 maybe.
I don't know.
We sold that to private equity a year and a half ago or so, and I got a chance to sit on the board of a private equity firm, which I never thought I'd be in a room with that caliber of people. Learned an awful lot with that. I'm told from them I brought value to that as well. So it's just a great experience all in all. Most of the time, in the early days, it was tough. I'm not going to try and sugarcoat it. It was tough, and expect that. But you're entrepreneurs, right? You guys are tough, right? It is something tough, but it's a great growth strategy for the right business, and I think it's a good growth strategy for many more businesses than people realize, especially with the silver tsunami going on and the baby boomer generation really turning over. One thing you didn't add, Samantha, that I wanted to add is there's like 13 million baby boomer owned businesses that are going to have to turn over. And just imagine that's how many businesses are out there, and many of them won't sell. The stats like 87% of them won't sell. And it's because they don't know. They're not in a room like you guys are. And so just be fortunate that you have this opportunity to learn about it. And if it's right for you, you know what to do, right? You know the team that's going to help you.
Great. Thank you.
That was a long answer.
It was, but I was expecting it. So my questions for you is around integration, because you've done a lot of integrations. So you've bought a business, you've gone through all of the experts here to prepare yourself. So in the first 100 days, what integration mistakes most often cost you people or customers?
That's a great question. Well, first of all, integration starts at the very beginning, with the broker relationship, with the relationship that you're building with the seller. Really understanding their culture from the owner's perspective, getting to know them, see how you align with them, see how the personalities match, understanding that people work for people that they like to work for. And if you have a big departure from your style compared to the seller, that's a red flag. Doesn't mean you couldn't do it, but that's a red flag you're going to deal with. So it starts there. And I won't even move forward unless I feel comfortable with that. And we've had a deal where we moved pretty deep into it, and the team went out and met with them. We were in due diligence, and my team saw something that I didn't, and we backed out of the deal because of culture. So understand that integration starts with the people. In the business that I was in, and you talked about blue sky, I was buying a lot of blue sky. I was buying a service-based business, had some assets, some equipment, but really it was the promise or the assumption that business is going to keep coming once I bought it. And so understanding the culture and how that aligns and how you align with your business into what their customers are used to getting from them was very important. And in the calibration business, I got that figured out pretty early in the process. So I think that's a really important part.
Great. Next question. What's one do for week one that helps protect the revenue and the talent?
So week one is really important. Oftentimes you do not get an opportunity to meet the team at all until you own the company. Very common. Every one of these guys will tell you, nope, you're not going to meet the team yet. Some key members you might meet in a larger business, CFO perhaps second in command, but you don't know the team, so you don't really know what you're getting. And so one of the things you got to really pay attention to is that alignment of the culture, but you also want them to believe in what's happening next. They're going to be terrified. I'm just going to tell you, their team is terrified. They may not act like they're terrified when you meet them. They may act excited, and they could be excited, but they're mostly terrified because they don't know if this guy's a jerk. They don't know if I'm going to keep my job. They don't know if they're going to find out I watch Netflix every day for 2 hours. Which we had a couple people in the company we bought through Lonnie that were doing that. And so they don't know that, right? So they're afraid. They're afraid they're going to lose their jobs. They're afraid of the unknown. And so a big thing that we do is really try and give them our plan a little bit. And the first step in the plan is do nothing. Learn from them. And I tell them all the time, look, we bought this company because of its value, and you guys are a huge portion of this value. The way you deliver your services, the way you manufacture your product is what we're buying. And so it'd be silly for me to come in and totally change everything. Now, to be clear, I'm going to change a bunch of stuff, but I'm not going to do it in the first 100 days, right? But you have to understand that the change has to be at the pace that the people can have in their appetite. And they have to build confidence and trust in you. And so that's an important part of it. Part of what I've done in most every situation when we got staff is I've given them all a raise on day one. And I want them to know that I'm as committed to them as I need them to be committed to me. And that buys you some goodwill for a little while. It really does. I also want them to know what's the direction that I foresee with this, a little bit about my style. And most importantly, I want them to know that I need to learn from them. And they need to tell us, what is working in this company that you better not change or I'm leaving. Or you better not change because it's going to destroy the company. I need to know that, right? Because we're going to learn from that. I also need to know oh my gosh, I wish you would change this right now. And I've had various experiences with that. I've had people that we said, I'll just tell the example. We have an example. We bought a company in California, a calibration company. It was our largest acquisition. And we were telling them, look, we're not going to change anything. You've got your systems. You got your process. It was a disaster. They were on paper. There was a whole bunch of stuff we were going to change. Like, we're not changing anything for 90 days. And we're going to learn. We're going to see what's working, what's not working. We're going to do that. And shortly after that presentation with the team and the individual talks we had with them, a group of them pulled me aside and said, you need to change this now. Like, we're tired of this paper stuff. It's taken us so much time and so much energy, and we've seen your work because they were a competitor. So they've seen our work. They were jealous of how efficient we were as an operation because they saw our work. We were like, I don't know how your guys come in and do it as fast as they do. I don't know how they produce the results that you guys get for them in the time that they do it. And so I said, this is how. And so I started showing it to them. And they're like, we want to be on it now. And so that afternoon, our IT department bought them all brand new laptops. And we started that process. Thank goodness, because I wanted to do that. But it was their idea, right? And so that was really important to do that. And had I not done that, it would have been much more difficult to take the company where I wanted to take it. But because I involved them in the decision making, and they were listened to, I got some trust with them, right? And they got some trust with me. So.
Great. And what is one don't that you learned the hard way that first-time buyers should avoid?
Oh, boy. I'll just use another example for that.
You have a lot.
So we bought a company called The Scale Guy. And everybody in my company remembers that company. My wife definitely remembers that company. It was a good friend of mine that we actually helped him start his business. He left a big competitor and wanted to start his own business, and we actually helped him. My wife actually set up their accounting. And I just love this guy. He was just a great guy, straight shooter. Everything was great about him. When we got into the deal, I was blinded by that relationship. And he had a customer concentration risk where a third of his revenue was coming from one customer, which was what I learned, customer concentration risk. And 2 weeks into the deal, that customer ended their contract with the deal, finding out later that his relationship there retired 2 weeks after he did. And they had already had plans to do something different. And so don't let your emotions control it. Don't want the deal to close more than it should. Let it come to you. Let the CPAs and the brokers and the bankers and the attorneys, help you vet that from a real logical, data-driven approach. Don't want it bad enough that you're going to skip over a part of the process and or ignore part of the process. And trust me, I ignored part of the process many, many times. I skipped over some of those things. We managed to survive most of those. Actually, we survived all of them, but it wasn't without a lot of effort. And so use your advisors and really make sure that you're not super emotional about making this happen. And you will get that way because you're going to build a relationship with the seller and you're going to want to do something right by them, especially if they were retiring, which is what I was doing. At 31, 32 years old, I was buying out gray-haired old guys, and now I'm one of them, And so, anyway, that. I thought that story might illustrate it better.
Yeah.
So.
Anything else that you want to mention just before we kind of close this section out that you want to, for anybody considering growth or acquisition?
Well, it's not about integration necessarily, but I want you to understand the magnitude of this strategy to grow your business, the magnitude that it could be. There's a thing called the arbitrage of multiples, and I'm sure you guys are familiar with that. When a business is a small entrepreneur-run company, a plumbing outfit's got one or two guys, they're doing maybe $300,000-400,000 a year. That's going to sell for a multiple of 1 to 2, 2.5 or times their EBITDA. I'm not going to get into the complicatedness of SDE and all this stuff, which is a different multiple. But this is going to sell for 2. Let's just say 2 times.
Which is kind of like it's the value of your business 2 times your profit.
Like 2 times your profit. To make it simple. It's not that simple, but to make it simple.
To make it simple.
When you buy 5 of them, and now you're at $1 million in EBITDA, that's going to sell for could be in the 5 times multiple. And so just by putting them together and systemizing and getting all those advantages of a consolidation that someone mentioned, consolidation of your expenses and getting that piece there, that's going to add value. But just the arbitrage of I bought it for 2x and sold it for 5x makes a huge difference. And as you get even bigger and you get into the private equity world and you're in multiple millions in EBITDA, in some industries, and just a lot of industries are different, but you're up above 5. You could be at 10. You could be at 15. Now, the top of the pile is publicly traded companies. So in my industry, in the calibration industry, the one publicly traded company, which was my target buyer when I was building this company, after I figured out that I had a strategy, after I bought a few, was a publicly owned company. They're trading at a 32x. And so if I'm buying at a 2x or an average of 3.2x, which is what my average was when we were buying, I was averaging buying at 3.2x and able to sell in the teens because of the size, you could take your small business and over the course of a few years, use acquisition to really create value. And I know when you're young, you're not thinking about exit, you're not thinking about that strategy, but I would encourage you to think about the end. Think about that strategy, especially if you use acquisition as a growth model, but just understand that. And it's something very powerful that most people don't know. Would you guys agree? No, most people don't know about this, right? So, and I learned that lesson, about halfway into I think we were at about 7 or 8 acquisitions when I learned that from my business coach. And from that point on, I was looking at that public company saying, that's who's going to buy me. And so I was researching them because they're public. You can get a lot of information. I'm like, I'm building this company for them. And when I sold my company, they were at my table and they gave us an offer. I didn't sell to them. But anyway, does that help?
It does.
Okay.
Yes. Okay, so we're going to start the question section of this, okay? So if you have a question, please raise your hand, and Sky will come over to record. Looks like we have a question right here, Sky.
Hey, so I know it's going to vary a lot based on industry, size of the business or whatnot, but if you guys were to try to put a ballpark to the cost of lawyers and attorneys and everything else, like what is the cost for those legal fees for that, if you're assuming a small size business?
Yeah, it is a really hard question to answer. Unfortunately, I'm going to say it's probably sometimes more than a buyer who's new to this process will realize. But it's really important to make sure we do everything right. So the real question is not how much you're going to pay now, but how much you're going to pay later if you don't do it right. That in my mind is the real question. So, yeah, I mean, we'll look at the deal and do our best to try to give an estimate of what it might cost, and that could be anywhere from $3,000 to $5,000 for a small acquisition. For a much bigger acquisition, it could be several times more than that.
3 to 30.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, depending on what we're doing, right? And the other thing is we don't always know what we're getting into at the start. So we're going to uncover a variety of surprises and tricks and issues and things are going to come up. And to some extent we can anticipate that, but we can't always. So it's really difficult to say. And the structure of the deal matters, and sometimes we don't know the structure of the deal until we're into it a bit. And then we're deciding we're going to do an F reorg. Well, that's going to require a few extra steps. Now there may be a benefit to you that pencils out. There may be a strong tax benefit to doing that, but it'll cost a lot more for me if we do that, right? So there's things like that you have to come into it as well. So I'm not trying to be evasive. I'm just trying to say it's really hard to say.
No, I get that. Well, thank you.
Let me just add a little something to that. So my recommendation, if you're thinking of doing acquisition, is do something small first, right? The complexity of it, really determines a lot of what the costs are going to be because it's risk management. And so if it's not super complex, you can kind of cut your teeth on that a little bit, buy a smaller organization. My first or second company we bought had 2 employees. And so it was pretty easy. And we absorbed the overhead portion of that operation. We got 2 technicians. The 2 owners retired, and we got the 2 technicians. And so we were able to absorb the cost of in that. And so that deal didn't take a lot of complexity. And so writing the deal was a little bit of a collaborative effort between the seller and the buyer. I mean, we had an attorney draft it up, and then, my attorney at the time wrote this unbelievably complex, agreement for this $400,000 deal. And the buyer and I just sat down and said, well, this doesn't apply to us at all. We lined it out, right? Now he's saying, don't say that, right? But there's a way you can get through this and still protect yourself and use your legal team. Sometimes your CPAs, although they're getting a little different in how they charge because of the shortage of CPAs right now, but sometimes your CPAs will give you that advice, in a quick phone call on whether this makes sense. So when you're looking at an acquisition, do first things first, right? See if it's going to make sense. If there's a broker involved, make sure the broker's like, yeah, this looks like it could be good. Then you talk to the banker. These guys don't get paid until the deal's done. So they're free at first, right? And you don't want to, really.
Not even commission-based. It's salary. So it's
right, you're a salary, you're there to serve it. But you can get a little bit of information from them before you spend the money to start having your CPA do analysis and start having your attorney do that. And so don't let that make you afraid, is what I'm getting at. Because I kind of sense, when you guys were all talking about this, I'm like, they're a little afraid, right? Because it's complex, and we don't want to scare them, but we want to make sure you do the right things. And that's how I did it small, right? And then you work up to bigger. You want to add, Lonnie?
Yeah. Okay. That's right. Yeah. Business buying is unlike anything else. You buy a house, you're probably never going to talk to the seller. Business buying is the opposite of that. There's a lot of engagement between the buyer and the seller. You're trying to match cultures, like Marshall talked about. Try to match, can I actually run this business? So there's a lot of engagement. So if you have all those conversations ahead of time, don't sign an LOI. If you give Mike a paragraph-long LOI, doesn't have much to start with. Banks can't approve anything, and CPA's like, yeah, I don't know. But if you have really good conversations and really kind of put up the framework of what the deal structure looks like, the timing and transition. I break it down to like this. A business deal is like two bridges. So the first bridge is the financial bridge. Like a buyer has call it A, B, C, D. A buyer has A cash, D's the price, what part of B and C is seller financing and bank financing. And then the second bridge is the training and transition bridge. Like, what do I need to know to run this business successfully? And that's kind of like, as the seller exits, what do you need to pull out of their head to run it successfully? What does the bench look like? What are the key employees? Can I run this business versus like my skill set? It's going to be different for every person too. So have your conversations a lot before you even get in the LOI stage. That'll minimize your expenses. So just engage. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be like, hey, what's your bottom dollar? But just be like, hey, what's your employees like? What's the culture like? What's your revenue like? What's your customer profile like? Just ask away. This is a very intimate process, because at the end of the day, you're going to find that sellers actually care about their business. They care about their employees. So the more questions you ask, the better off you're going to be and more likely to make a deal too.
So Marshall touched on this briefly. When you have conversation with the seller directly, if there's certain terms that you agree to, it's nice to have your professionals involved in that interaction, because there are certain agreements that can actually be deal killers, and quickly change the dynamic of the appetite from like a banking standpoint. So something that gets taken off of the table might be a bigger deal than it seems in negotiation, and it's just always good to have a professional involved if you don't understand the cause and effect component of that.
I was just going to add, also do your due diligence on us, right? I think it's really important to, this is self-serving of me to say, but it's important to get an attorney who's been around the block and done some M&A work. I don't think there are a lot of attorneys in Eugene who can say that. So you kind of want to know that they've seen some things. The more deals you do, the more you realize, the more you understand or anticipate what problems are going to arise. You kind of know what's standard and what's not in these types of deals. We can be more efficient because we've done it, and we do it a lot. CPAs, and the person who does your taxes may be great at doing your taxes, but acquisition are different. And a CPA who has some knowledge of structuring a deal and the different options that are available and helping you pencil all that out and do that analysis, that's really invaluable, and there are not a lot of CPAs who can do that. So make sure you kind of do the due diligence on us as well.
Well, and I just want to add too that one of the things that I love is that I've gone through this process a lot, and that's one of the things that I love doing is helping business owners figure out when to talk to all these people. So we come up with the strategy, and so if you're interested in that conversation, then I can say, okay, now's the time to talk to the CPA. Now's the time to talk to them. And so being someone who's gone through that process, we can help identify how far I can help you get there, but then when to start bringing in the experts, right? Which can kind of help save time and money, and we can kind of get the deal structured. I have templates for LOIs. I have a lot of that stuff done, which really helps make it so that once the template's done, we can bring it to the attorney to really help fine-tune those things at the areas that I'm not an expert at, right? And when you're looking at different levels of acquisitions, as Marshall said, that's when it really helps. When you're looking at a smaller deal, it's less complex, it tends to cost less to bring the experts in. When it's more complex, there's going to be a lot of variables that come into play. So it's a really good question. Another question?
Can I add to that question real
Yeah, go
quick?
ahead.
I just want to add that when you're doing acquisition, you're going to look at a lot of businesses that you don't want to buy, and you're going to learn a lot from those businesses, and all that costs you is your time, right, to research them. And so it's a little guerrilla marketing kind of thing. I learned a tremendous amount, and of all the companies we bought, there was at least 5 or so companies for each one of those that we didn't buy. My wife thought we were buying everything, but we were saying no to a lot of stuff, and we still do. And so just understand that the learning curve of that is part of how you get used to the idea, and you can do some research, like look at biz buy sell or look at, different things and get used to the language. It's biz by sell.com. And I'm not saying buy from there because that's usually where the junk businesses go, right? But, it depends. I was really dedicated to learning how to do this. And although I got the advice that I needed, it started with my business coach. And he said, when I was going to buy the second company, he's like, this is a good strategy. And my wife's like, what are you talking about? We don't have any money. But it was as we understood it. And then we started, using experts. I started learning how to do valuations. And, there's a lot of information out there that you can get. Some of it is wrong, especially with the internet now. But internet back then seemed to be better. I don't know, for some reason. But just understand, if you want to do this, you can do a lot of legwork yourself before it's time to bring an expert on and it starts to cost you money. I have never let the lack of money stop me from growing my company. And I would suggest you never do either. Fair enough?
All right.
So the acquisitions that I've observed, there's been a lot of evaluations that are overinflated, or their impression of what their business is worth is definitely based on their emotions and what they have invested in the business as an entrepreneur. How do you broach the subject about the valuation of the business being overly inflated due to their emotions or their personal investment versus the actual evaluations? And how do you do that? How do you broach that subject without it becoming an insult?
Good question.
You want
Can
to take that one,
you guys hear that? Hold on, I just want to check. Did everybody hear the
My
question?
short answer would be talk to your broker.
Did you guys hear the question? Yes? So the question was about when a business is for sale and the price is overinflated because it's based on the emotions of the seller, basically. So how do you broach that topic?
Well, if you make an offer, back it with a narrative. If they're asking for 5X and you're thinking 2X, back it up with a narrative. Just be like, hey, here's some comps from Deal Stats. Here's what I know 4 other businesses sold for. Here's what the bank's going to lend on it. Here's the cash I have. So, not to be an insult, Mr. or Mrs. Seller, but here's what I can offer based on these facts. And usually they're not offended. And I mean that. Usually they're not offended. If it's just like a Hail Mary offer without any information, they're like, oh, where's that come from? But if you're like, hey, this is what I have. This is lower than you're asking. This is what the bank will finance. And I did my due diligence, and here's the offer that I feel strong. And it usually goes over really well. So you see that a lot. So like businesses out there for sale, and like sometimes they're pie in the sky, asking prices. Everything's negotiable in this. So just make an offer, back it up with some data, and it usually goes over okay. Sometimes you get a deal out of that way too, you know. Yeah.
And sometimes you can help bridge the gap by getting creative and using different things, such as, for example, an earnout maybe. Maybe you can come up with some sort of a post-closing consulting arrangement that benefits the business after close. I mean, there's different ways you can get creative to help try to bridge that gap. So again, that probably starts with Lonnie and a discussion with him. But it's just because, you know, you feel like you're miles apart doesn't necessarily mean you can't get there. There's different ways to do it.
There's a lot of creativity and a lot of sellers, and Lonnie can speak to this. It's really about the price, but the price is just one part of buying a business. It's not just about the price, because when you think about the price, you're not necessarily just handing them a pile of cash, right? There's also the terms of the agreement sometimes. If you're not going with a full bank, sometimes you're doing an owner carry, or there's, like you said, there's some kind of consulting fee that you can do. There's so many different ways that you can do that. And so if they're stuck on the price, like Mike mentioned, there's different ways that you can kind of work through that creatively.
There's a saying that's your price, my terms.
Yeah.
And, you know, I've bought businesses for an overvalued price because the terms were outstanding and the cash flow worked. And so I use it as a marketing strategy. And so now, obviously, I wasn't an expert at this with my first one or second one, but as I became more versed at it, you know, I could be more creative in those conversations. And so I wouldn't let it stop you. You know, part of it is the motivation of the seller and where they're at, you know, in the phase of this. You know, they want to sell if they're talking to you. They're afraid to, though. You know, they're afraid because this is likely the biggest transaction they've ever done in their lives. Most time it's more than their house. And so just understand that. And understand that, you know, if you come in with some knowledge that you get from working with guys like this, you know, you can be the leader of that conversation. And I've had lots of situations where, you know, I've been dealing with an unsophisticated seller. You know, I usually try and get them to tell me what they want for it, and then I try and back into whether I can do that or not. And if I'm close or I think I can back into it, I'm going to accept their offer. And sometimes it's out of this world. I had one deal that was just out of this world, the valuation. So I presented it in such a way using their cash and their receivables and everything else to show them how much money they were actually walking away with in an asset sale. And we could get to the number they wanted through that structure. But I had bought, that was the last one I bought before I sold the company to private equity. And I just needed, you know, one last thing to get them across the finish line. And with that one, what it was a husband and wife company. The wife wanted to keep working. And so when my sales manager left, I had my sales manager job to offer her, and she was great at sales. So same deal, like a year later, I said, hey, Joyce, her name is Joyce, I can offer you the sales manager role at this salary. And it put them across the finish line. So the terms are really the biggest part of the whole thing. The price is not it. Now, I tried to buy it for buying a boat for her husband, but that didn't work. I even looked up the boat and got a picture of it and everything. Like, if I buy you this boat, you'll give me the business? And he's like, well, maybe not. So anyway, just understand the creativeness of how you do it without taking the risk with using, you know, the experts. You know, if you start doing it, you're going to get better at it just like I did. And if it's something that's a good strategy for you and you do your first one, you're going to want to do another one, I guarantee you.
Okay, great. So just really quick, I want to give a huge round of applause to our panelists today. That was amazing information. Thank you guys so much. We just have a couple more things, but I'm going to let you guys go ahead and have a seat while we kind of finalize here.
We're offering some freebies. So we have an acquisition readiness checklist that kind of goes through a lot of what we covered today. But we're also recording this panel discussion, and we're going to create a do-don't cheat sheet, right, for everybody. And we'll be sending that out to you as well, along with the recording from today's panel discussion.
Yep, so scan the QR code, get on the list, and then once we have the recording done and the cheat sheet, which we're just basically gonna take a lot of the gold essentially that we got from today and create the cheat sheet and then send that out once we have it all done, okay? So make sure to get on the list. If you don't scan this, being on the list from the check-in table will also get you on that list as well, okay? Also, save the date. Next Profits and Pints is already scheduled for November 18th. Did I say that right? Yes. We're gonna talk about Plan to Win 2026. So this is going to be talking about identifying your biggest constraint before you set your next strategy. So same time, same place, 4 o'clock here. That's right, Linda, we're all set? Okay, great. So we're going to be here November 18th. Set your calendar now. And then last but definitely not least, we have 2 workshops that are coming up. So in addition to doing work with business owners that want to grow through acquisition, which is something I'm very passionate about, obviously, otherwise I would not have scheduled this, I also am doing some work on exit planning as well. So I'm actually partnering with the Scaling Up community, which is the certification that I'm with, and I'm doing an exit planning workshop. They're calling it Scaling Up to Finish Strong, and that's going to be on November 7th. So if you or someone you know is getting to the point where they want to kind of prepare for their exit, I wanted to just give you guys that information. There's flyers on the table if you are interested or know of anybody that is interested. Also, I'm going to be doing an acquisition ready masterclass. So this is going to be over Zoom, mainly because I do have a group of people that are not local to Eugene that are interested in this as well. So I decided to do it over Zoom. It's going to be a 2-part masterclass. So 2 hours each, 4 hours total, scheduled for December, 1st and 8th. So 2 different Mondays. And I'm going to do it for $195 for this masterclass. And what we're going to do is we're going to take a lot of the information we talked about today and really set you guys up for getting started with growth through acquisition. If it's something that you're seriously considering, this is going to set you up to really talk about what is your strategy. What is it that you want to go after to grow through acquisition so that you're really ready to start looking for that business to come up with what is your buy box, what is that acquisition going to look like, so you can really start to look at that, okay? So if you're interested, you can scan the QR code, but we're actually going to give away a free one for tonight. So Sky, do you want to go ahead and pull a ticket? Oh, nice, Styles. Okay, so you are signed up. Save the dates. We'll send you information, and then if for anybody else that wants to sign up, QR code is here. There's also flyers on the back. And we went a little long today, but there was a lot to cover. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you have any other questions, let us know. We'll be around here. But please eat some food, have some drinks, mix and mingle. And thank you guys so much for coming. I appreciate it. Thank you guys. Thanks for joining us at Profits and Pints. If you enjoyed this session, we'd love your feedback. Just click the link to fill out the quick survey. Your input helps shape future topics and makes this experience even better. Until next time, cheers to smart moves and great conversation. Is there something that you're wanting your company that you're thinking, I want to expand my company to offer this service or to offer this geography, but can you buy it instead?